Okay, so this lesson is going to cover understanding the float, the contain, and the delivery. So you got three timing components that we're going to be working on today. So with that being said, is the biggest question we get is like, what is the float and why did you come up with it and so forth. So the float, basically all the float is, it's a terminology that I use for when the club is in transition. So in body as well, as you'll learn. So in any swing, even if I have a baby swing like this right here, when it clips going back, your back swing just here, and then it starts to change directions and go forward, that would be considered the transition. So when it goes back to, as soon as it goes forward just a few inches, that would be considered a transitional zone. So transition, as you'll understand as you go through our program, is what I believe one of the most important parts of the golf swing, because it's a place to accumulate torque, and you'll learn this the longer you're in the program. You'll understand it's a place where you can, no matter what backswing you have here, you know, a lot of people can relate with Jim Furyk where they see the club go up and here, and then he reroutes it and it's all great. Or, you know, Kenny Perry or Fred Couples, you name the swing. It's a place where you can go in and stabilize and get the club and body to become one again. And then you can also accumulate all this torque and power. So when you swing it back, you don't really get all that. When you swing it halfway back, you don't really get all that. But whenever you go into transition, wherever that zone may be, wherever that club is going to be, when you get in transition, that's where you can start to accumulate torque and really sink yourself down and lower yourself and accumulate a lot of energy between the club and body. Okay? And with that, when you have the club and body connected, then all of a sudden you can use them all against the golf ball. So the biggest problem we find is when you're in the transition zone is players will do, I'm going to give you 3 examples, but there's 100 more in between these. They'll either go up quick and slam the club straight down, which they say a cast here, but it's really not because of the cast. They come up, they come straight down, and their body goes forward. Okay? Then you have the other player that's maybe like a limber high school player. They'll take it up here and they'll snap their hips and hold their arms back. And again, they're flipping it. Or they're holding off. There could be different things. But in general, everybody's usually losing energy between the club and body. And so what they try to do is they will try to go and fix these positions down here by the ball, try to hold all this lag and all this. And what happens is it doesn't work because the problem is not right there. The problem is in that transition zone. So if I was to swing all the way back here, and then all of a sudden I sunk down and accumulate torque and let everything slow down and collect between the club and body, then all of a sudden when I come out of that, I can come back as one unit. Okay? And that's should be a major goal of every player, is to be able to, one, as you get wherever the end swing is. So let's just say it's right here, a little 20-yard shot. We go here. I can sink down, slow the club down to a stop, collect my body, and now move as one unit against the golf ball. Okay? Because like we talked about originally, we have the timing contact point, which trumps everything in golf, which is raw timing, and then we have the grip alignment point. We've already talked about those two components in the bunker and then our starting series. This one now, this float component is to give you potential energy. Okay? So let's just say you have good timing, but you don't have a lot of good energy. You might be able to take your club and flick it like that and be able to use the sole of the club against the ground but not have really a pretty swing. You can play good golf doing that. It's better than doing it where you have this pretty swing like this and you don't know where you're going with the side of the shaft or the sole of the club. My point being is, if somebody already has good timing, they know where to flick it even though their forms are broken and all this, then they can learn through floating and our forms as we go through these other components how to create your own energy between the body and the club. You have to create it yourself, and then how to save and store that energy, which is the containment, and then how to deliver that in through the timing contact point and the grip alignment point. Okay? So the word float is a suspension. Okay? So when this club, whenever it goes, as we already defined the transition, so when the club is in any point where it's finishing the backswing and going and about to start into the downswing, that area is where you want the club to, it's a suspension zone. The club gets very light, so it's not a lot of tension in the hands and locked up. It's the energy in the body becomes very heavy to the ground. Now that's not, I'm not trying to get stiff, but my body lowers itself, sinks itself down. Not squatting is not a straight squat like this, like that. It gradually lowers itself down, sinks itself down, and then the club becomes suspended up in the air, wherever it's at. The body's lowering itself down to get that energy and that torque accumulation. Then they become, you'll feel it if you practice this, they become one unit. The side of the shaft, which you'll learn here in just a second, and the body all of a sudden are now connected, and now I can come back without a lot of force. I don't have to hit hard now because I'm using my whole body and club as one unit to use the mass and momentum against the golf ball. So we have the number one thing in the float is to slow down the club. Okay, so when you're set up and you're training your drills or whatever, if your swing is this long, then what you would do is right before the end of that swing, you would sink and slow down. Okay, and you let the body and club become one unit, and then you would move forward. Okay, now with that being said, the sinking, let's explain that relative to squatting or just staying straight. So most amateurs, higher handicaps, especially as we get elderly, what will happen is if you look at this angle, it's better. They stay the same height. So they'll stay the same height and they twist, or they come up and they flip, which looks like they'll come back and up and flip. Okay? But in transition, if you watch, they stay this height. The reason, so everybody talks about the new word is everybody squats. It is not a squatting action. It is a sinking, and it's a gradual lowering yourself into the ground. And they do that in a lot of the Tai Chi, which you'll see us where we'll do things where we're standing up like this, and we'll gradually lower ourselves down, and then we'll gradually pick ourselves up. But it's not a drop squat. Okay, so what I mean by that is if the club's going back, I don't want to see somebody just squat and not turn and come through. See, because they dropped their head, so they got some torque here, but it wasn't smooth and rhythmical like what it should be in the float zone. So then the energy is going to come out very stiff and rigid, and it won't help you with precision or power. And so what I want to see is, as you're turning your right side away from the ball, as you've learned, and you're going through your swing, as you're going back, wherever the ending point is in any swing. So if it's, let's just say it's right here, as it's going back right before that, I'm going to sink myself, gradually sink myself and soften it up and sink, and then hold for a split second, get the body and club connected, and then I can practice going soft and deceleration through the shot. Because if you're trying to accelerate, with what happens if you're trying to, even if you do this and you try to accelerate, you're going to lose that containment, you're going to lose the feel, and you won't be able to teach yourself how to play. You won't be able to teach yourself what you're doing wrong, which is the most important part of this program. So if you watch this, let's do it again. We're going to go here. We're going to gradually see. You'll see my head height as I'm doing this. As I'm swinging back, I'm gradually lowering myself against the ground here with my feet, knees, and my hips. I've got plenty of depth, so as I went back, I didn't go this way, so I didn't do that. When I went back, I started to push my hips back, and I started to gradually sink my knees down. I come to a slight pause, and then I move forward. Okay? So that's the transition on a short shot. Every swing has a transition, the length of it. It'll have a transition. It doesn't mean it's good or bad. It just means that there's a transition in every swing. Your job is, whenever you're in transition, is to slow the club head down and the body down, and gradually sink yourself down into the ground where you can accumulate torque. And then there's a certain amount that you will feel the connection between the ground and body in the club, where you can start to bring it back up against the golf ball. Now, why don't you just go all the way down like this, right? My answer to that is, you wouldn't, if you were trying to dunk a basketball, you would not touch your butt to the floor to try to dunk it, because what would happen is you would burn the muscle. There's a point of where you lose that. So if I stay tall, we know that if I stay up here and swing like this, you're not going to use any body. It'll be all arms and flip. Doesn't mean you can't hit the timing contact point and play a little okay, because some people do that decent. But if I get up here and all of a sudden I sink myself down and lower myself against the ground, there's a point where you can feel your everything connect where it's maximum power. Just like if you're dunking a ball, there's a certain point where you go down a little bit, and you know that's the perfect spot to release the energy. Whereas if I went here and dropped all the way down, now it doesn't make sense. I've lost the arc, the radius of the club. I've killed the energy here too much. I've jammed myself and so forth. So you go back and you gradually lower yourself. It will be a lot lower than you think. Then when these come together, just be patient coming out of there and use your mass against the ball. Okay? So that's the float. Now, the last component of the float, they're all very important. The number one thing, regardless, is you have to allow the club and body to stop wherever that transition is and collect energy. And they become one, and you use that against the golf ball. Okay, so one of the other elements that's very, very, very important to give you an advantage in timing on the downswing is wherever the ending transition is. So let's just say I'm going right here. The right wrist at the end of that will bend, not cock. So cocking, if you're watching here, is this way. Bending is this way. Now, how much does it bend? Because that's very important. We do not want that much bend with your right wrist. So when you got here, if you bend it, it would look like this. Yeah, you see the club's behind, but it's too much. So when we go, you slightly bend the wrist about 10 degrees. Okay, so just about that much. So it'd be here. That's how much you would bend it. And you do that at the end, right before, right in the start of the transition of any swing. So if I was here, I would add a little of that in. I sink. Obviously, you saw me sink with my legs, collect, and then I'll go through the timing contact point into the grip alignment point. If I go all the way back like this, then I would do it. If I'm here just like this, then I'm going to side bend that right wrist. Don't do the left wrist. So if I do my left wrist, what we found is it rolls the elbow and arm on most players, and it rolls the club off plane, and then they tip it back over, which causes a right hand flip through impact. So the right wrist only, the back wrist, if you're lefty, obviously the backhand, you will take it as you go wide right at the end of that. Let's just say it's right here. I'm going to add that right wrist bend. That looks like this. So I'm here. I got a little, it's just that much, that's all. And then I can move forward. That puts energy into the side of the shaft. It gets the shaft on the right angle. If I swing it back and I bend it right here as it's going back right here, and I turn, I'm going to have the club face shut, and I'm probably going to get stuck on wedge shots. So you don't want to prematurely bend this right wrist. You want to turn back all one unit just like on the table, and at the end of the movement, if this is it, you just add a little right wrist bend, just like this, and that'll put torque in the shaft. It'll get the angle of the side of the shaft on the right area where you can use it against the golf ball without having to roll the hands. That right side bending is every single swing. So if I had a swing where I was just going to, let's just say here, I'm going to add the right wrist and my body here, slow down, grip alignment, or timing contact, grip alignment point. Okay, so if I went all the way back right at the end of that, I'm going to bend the right wrist, sink, and collect, just patience in here. There's no rush. The downswing, the transition is where I can accumulate power. And I'm going to demonstrate this, so hopefully this helps you understand, the ones that are listening. So you can swing back, no power, no power. All of a sudden I accumulate it, and then you can see the power. Now what I'm going to do, I'm not going to look in the video this time, and you just watch. I'm just going to stay tall, no power, no power. All of a sudden I collect it, so you can see the power. So if I stayed up here like this, and I swung down the same way, I'm not going to hit the ground. I'm not going to have any power. The timing's going to be affected by it and so forth. Let's just say I'm up here like this, and all of a sudden, so now I can play golf, and I can play at a very, very high level. I can pick the club up and not really do anything, and all of a sudden I get engaged, and there you go. So you can hear the sound that you can make, and all that is, obviously my backswing, I'm barely swinging, I'm here, but then all of a sudden I engage in transition, get loaded, and then I can apply. I create this potential energy and this torque to use against the timing contact point and the ball, obviously. So that's what the float is. Now let's just say I was doing the same thing here. If I was just here and then all of a sudden I can accumulate it, and boom. Now I believe it should look a little bit more like this, but it doesn't have to be. So most people stand tall and they're limp, but this is where you have to engage with your body. And it's going, if you watch, I'm pushing, at the end of that, if I'm swinging like this, wherever I'm going, here, here, or here, at the end of that, I engage and get against the ground, get my body loaded. So when I deliver, same thing with the right wrist or back wrist, I can apply that against the golf ball. So that's what the float is. So you've got the components of how to slow the club down and the body down to where they become one and you feel the energy between them. Wherever that is, you understand transition now. The float is transition. It is the answer, the solution for transition. Then what happens is, if you get those connected, the next part is the contain and delivery. They're essentially one thing. So you're containing the energy of the shaft and the body through the shot, and you're delivering the club, okay? So they are the second and third, but they're really just one thing, okay? So containment and delivery. So if I come up here, and I've collected the energy, let's just say we're using this swing, I'm going to contain the energy. I'm pushing this energy away from me with the shaft, the side of the shaft. I'm not trying to cast the club head, and I'm not trying to pull on the handle. When I get this up, and if this is the end of my swing, I want the side of the shaft to move away from me. I'm not trying to spin my hips. I'm just sinking, and what I do is I push this side of the shaft, and then my body becomes all one unit to the ball, okay? And that's how you would practice. If you have trouble transition, practice just like this. Okay, so you practice and stop everything. And here, you do not want to try to pull the handle and superficially fake that out. You do not want to cast the club head. So what happens is the side of the shaft is moving forward, the handle's moving forward, and the club head is moving away. It feels like the club head's doing this, but the handle's moving forward. So that creates a wider radius, and a shallower arc through the ball, so you hit better iron shots, you have better ball control, and obviously you'll drive the ball better because you won't have those spinny shots. So when I'm here, the plane, you could have one that's on plane like this, and that's real narrow here, or you could have one that's got a little more space, same plane, and it's right here. But this right here is more powerful because the club's moving away and my handle's moving into the grip alignment point. So I have more kind of distal end speed, as they would say in biomechanics, more radius, more space in the downswing, and I have a shallower approach. I don't have all this trying to tug it in. If I get here, it looks good on video, but then I can't deal with all the energy. It would just come in here and collapse like probably most of you have found, which is not true lag, okay? Now there's going to be options in other videos that I show you, if you're a certain type of player, how to get this to balance out, but this will really help you. And so when you get the right wrist set, like we were talking about, where it bends to in the float, what will happen is you just unwind and deliver. If you keep a wide radius and you have the right wrist done correctly in the float, then that club is more than likely going to come in straight unless you are making a twisting move here and or a bending move here. So if we just keep the depth in the hips and we keep the body moving forward and not trying to twist the arms around, we're going to be in really good shape. So the contain and delivery are essentially, again, the same thing. We're trying to, we've created energy on our own against the ground, the torque, the club, everything. We've got our body centered and loaded, and then so now we're going to try to contain and deliver that through the timing contact point and into the grip alignment point. And then from there, it's gone. You know, that's where you'll see players, they get here and you might fall over or whatever, but they had all this, boom. And then you can make weird movements if you have to and all that stuff. You don't need to, but you can. So that's where you'll see not everybody finishes the same way. So again, remember the float. Really spend your time mastering the float, finding the energy. If you're up here and you're staying tall, just play around. Push your hips back, keep the club here, push your hips back. You know, move your head around, try to find where's the most. So if you're here and most people are not like this, they're either real tall and they're like this. They're like this. Just push your hips back, flex your knees down, and play with your upper body until you find where you're strongest at, and then play the game what we call strong or weak, where you start playing around, and I go, so if I was just messing around, I was over here, I'd go weak, 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 but then now I'm strong, okay? And I feel like, oh man, I can really do something here. You have to play that game, and that's part of learning about yourself. And so the answer to transition is the float. How's it going? Doing all right?